proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening, wonderful people. It's me, Patrick Christie's, identifying as the formidable Jacob Rees-Mogg on State of the Nation tonight. It's been reported that Britain's asylum backlog has hit a total of 175,000 people for the first time. In the space of a year, the taxpayer has paid an extra 1.85 billion quid to accommodate these illegal crossings. Something needs to change, and fast. I'll be having a big debate on this with my panel and an immigration lawyer, Ivan Samson, who has some startling revelations for you. And the UN. Oh, they're useless as a chocolate teapot, that lot, aren't they? Well, they claim that the UK should pay 18.8, not million, not billion, no, trillion in reparations for its involvement in the slave trade. Didn't you hear? We're busy paying the bill for all those illegal migrants, aren't we? But there's nothing more uncomfortable than thinking about Sir Keir Starmer dancing around like a little girl at a Coldplay concert, is there? Well, unfortunately, there's been a lot of that happening lately as MPs have taken freebies worth almost 200 grand just this summer. It's all right for some, isn't it, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, but the Royal Rumble, well, it's rumbling once again. Harry is going to fly into the UK for a charity event on the eve of our late Queen's death. Where will Charles and William be? Well, at the other end of the country. Apparently, I'll be joined by royal commentator Judita De Silva on this. And State of the Nation starts now. We've got it all tonight. I will be joined by a high-spirited panel this evening. Former BBC Newsnight political editor Michael Crick and tabloid journalist and broadcaster, the wonderful Mike Parry. As always, I want to hear from you. It is the most important part of the programme, so email me, mailmog@gbnews.com. Send your views in, get yourself on the telly. But right now, it's time for the news of the day with Ellie Costello.
Thanks, Patrick. It's 2 minutes past 8. I'm Ellie Costello in the GB newsroom. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has sent his condolences to the family of the Wagner Group leader who was reportedly killed in a plane crash north of Moscow yesterday. Yevgeny Prigozhin was one of the 10 people named on the jet's passenger list. Mr. Putin described the mercenary boss as a talented businessman.
I knew Prigozhin for a very long time, since the early 1990s. He was a man with a complex destiny, and he made serious mistakes in life. He achieved the results he needed, both for himself and when I asked him for the common cause, as in these last months. He was a talented person, a talented businessman. He worked not only in our country and worked with results, but also abroad in Africa in particular.
GB News understands the government is looking to block the former NatWest chief executive's multi-million-pound payout. Dame Alison Rose quit after it emerged she'd talked about Nigel Farage's finances to a journalist. Her actions are being independently investigated. The backlog of asylum cases has hit a record high. More than 175,000 people were waiting for an initial decision on their application at the end of June. That's up 44% on last year. Donald Trump is due to surrender himself on charges of trying to overturn the result of the 2020 presidential election in Georgia. These are live pictures outside the Fulton County Jail, where we're expecting him to arrive later. He's facing dozens of criminal charges and will go on trial several times in the next 18 months, with the Georgia prosecutor wanting an October start for the Trump election trial. Patients are being warned of severe delays as NHS consultants in England strike for 2 days. Routine hospital care is expected to come to a standstill, with NHS leaders anticipating major disruption. The British Medical Association also announced that medics will go on strike in late September and early October. The number of students receiving the highest GCSE grades has fallen from last year, but is still higher than before the COVID pandemic. It follows a spike in higher grades in 2020 and 2021, when exams were cancelled because of COVID and results based on teachers' assessment instead. And finally, London Zoo is staging its annual weigh-in. Penguins, tigers and gorillas are among the 14,000 animals being measured by zookeepers over the next year. The zoo says it wants to make sure that every animal is eating well and growing at the rate it should. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by playing Play GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, I am becoming increasingly fearful that we're going to end up having an asylum seeker amnesty. The latest immigration and asylum figures landed today. We currently have 175,457 people waiting for an initial decision on an asylum application in the UK. That was at the end of June this year, up 44% from the end of June last year, and the highest figure since current records began back in 2010. It means the total cost of the asylum system has now reached £3.97 billion a year, up by £1.85 billion last year. And, of course, from £2.12 billion the year before that. And if we go far enough back, 2012, 2013, that total was at £500 million. But I think people are getting too bogged down with the fact that we don't have enough staff, allegedly, to process these asylum claims, or that they're taking too long to process them. I think it might be a distraction from the much bigger problem, which is that it appears nigh on impossible to actually reject an asylum claim. We can have somebody who appears to have entered this country illegally, who doesn't look that much like a child, but does claim to be, or who doesn't have any documents and can't prove that they're fleeing a war, can't prove that they're fleeing persecution, can't prove that they've been trafficked into Britain, and yet it seems very difficult to reject these claims. It is clearly almost impossible to process these people in a safe third country like Rwanda, and it is also clearly impossible to deport most of these people. When we consider that, and we look at those latest numbers about the cost of our asylum backlog rising at nearly £2 billion a year, the number of people increasing by nearly 45% year on year, and we look at the fact that it appears as though this is just going to keep on happening. How long is it before somebody properly comes out and just says it? Our only solution is to offer a full amnesty, let everybody here stay, let them work and pay tax, and we just start again. I see and hear a lot of good, hard-working, ordinary, salt-of-the-earth British people getting ground down by this, getting beaten into submission, getting primed and ready to just give up, roll over and succumb to an asylum seeker amnesty, which is literally just delayed open borders. That's what that is. But I would urge you to not give up, to not give in, because I think it is worth remembering something important. Around 87% of those who crossed the Channel in the last year are men, reportedly. And the vast majority have come from countries where it's fair to say that our norms, our values, our attitudes towards women, towards gay people, quite possibly our general way of life, are diametrically opposed. And a lot of people on the left right now might think that you're the baddie for wanting to push back on this. But wind the clock forward 10 or 15 years, see what happens, see what the reality is, and I think they may well realise that you were right. But, of course, I want to know your thoughts. Don't forget to let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. My first guest tonight is straight out the top drawer. Joining me is specialist immigration lawyer, it's Ivan Sampson. I will also be going to my panel as well, former BBC Newsnight political editor Michael Craig and tabloid journalist and broadcaster Mike Parry. There he is. Ivan, I will come to you first. I wonder if there is a bigger problem here, OK, which isn't that, well, we haven't got enough staff to process all of these people. It is that actually it is very difficult to reject any of them.
It is, and the Refugee Convention, the laws that govern the evidential burden is very low. Quite rightly so, because people fleeing persecution may not even have a passport, have evidence. If you're saying that the government's been persecuting, I've been tortured, well, you may not have documents to prove it. So that the burden threshold was really low. I think things have moved on since then. Most people coming here are fleeing places where there is violence, where there's conflict. And they may not actually be being persecuted per se, but simply fleeing because the country's in a state of conflict. So things have changed. I think we need to re-look at the convention, look at the evidential burdens, and look at the burden of proof for those seeking asylum.
What is the reality, though, at the minute? If somebody just arrives, OK, and they don't have any documentation, quite possibly because they've disposed of that of their own free will, passed through numerous different safe countries, is it, and we genuinely think, someone looking at their claim genuinely thinks, I don't think you're an asylum seeker. Well, what happens then, though? Because we don't appear to be deporting many people. We obviously aren't sending anyone at the moment to Rwanda. So, realistically, we're not really going to be able to ever get through a backlog, are we?
No, it's going to be difficult because we need to have a returns policy with countries where we suspect these people are from. The problem is we can't identify where they're actually from. So somebody who's, say, living on the border of Syria and says, I'm a Syrian, we don't have an effective system to identify them as not being Syrian. One of my clients was interviewed by an interpreter who himself had got asylum, and my client was adamant he was not an Iraqi, as he claimed.
So just to drill down on that then, and this is anecdotal, but you had a client who was Iraqi.
Yes.
And he claimed that he was interviewed by somebody who was also claiming to be Iraqi, but wasn't, and he was working in our asylum seeker.
He said he's from Egypt. Not difficult to note from the accent where somebody's from. I think the government needs to invest some money in technology. They had a system until recently for identifying the way you speak. And that was flawed. It was challenged by lawyers. It was found to be flawed, and it was getting wrong decisions.
Okay.
But I think technology has moved on. AI has moved on. We should be able to identify people.
All right, I'll leave you there for this. But, Michael, I'll go to you now. Michael Craig, do you think that any politician will have the stomach to just say, actually, let's have an amnesty?
No. And we know that amnesties in other fields, like gun ownership, just don't really work because you have an amnesty, everybody's allowed to hand in their guns, and then the problem re-arises. And I think everybody would realise that that is what all that would do was encourage more people to come here, because they would say, well, not only are you likely to get away with it, but after a few years there'll be another asylum amnesty and you'll be doubly free. So I just think that realistically is never going to happen. Certainly, the Labour Party will never do it. The Conservative Party will never do it.
So, Mike Parry, what realistically then is going to happen? We've decided so far, we've realised so far that we can't really almost reject anyone. And quite often some of the people doing the applications may themselves not be telling the whole truth. We're not going to get any political party that goes, we've got an amnesty. So the only thing left is that we end up with an extra several 100,000 people every year and a bill of a couple more billion quid.
Yeah, I can't be the only one who read the report in the weekend papers about the way Belgium handles this, OK? Have you seen that? Belgium stopped 90% of people who want to set sail from Belgian shores to this country. The Belgians push them back, or they confiscate the boats that they're going to get into. That is the supply chain. If you stop with the supply chain, a lot of the boats come from Germany. A lot of them come from as far away as China. Why don't we get to the source of where... Do people understand this is now the world's biggest industry? Smuggling people across the English Channel, smuggling people across the Mediterranean, smuggling people from Mexico into the United States of America is one of the world's biggest industries. It generates tens of billions of pounds. These people now have their own armies, OK? They have their own armed people literally pushing people into boats. And you've got to bring the military in to try and fight that sort of major force.
Yeah, I mean, I have called on numerous different occasions for us to, get the SAS to work and smash these human trafficking gangs, and I remain unconvinced that the full might of the Western world's militaries cannot crack down on
totally agree.
or the sale of boats.
I totally agree.
Well, yes, but the sale of boats and all of that goes on in a country where we don't have any sovereignty, and we've got even less sovereignty now that we're no longer members of the European Union.
But what's happened to international cooperation? Shouldn't we all be working together?
Well, there is less cooperation between us and our European neighbours.
Because France don't want it to stop.
Both of you park that for a second. I'll bring you back in on this now. Is there any reason why post-Brexit there should be less legal groupthink when it comes to Europe as a whole, do you think?
Look, we need to have what we discussed this before we came on air, systems thinking. At the moment, the government's focused on one thing, stopping the boats, and not focused on relieving the pressures on the asylum system. You see, you said you can't reject an asylum application. You can. Absolutely you can. The problem is when you reject somebody, you've got nowhere to send them to.
That's it.
Which is where Rwanda came in. The government realised that, wait a second, we can reject all these people, we can't send them back anywhere, let's send them to Rwanda. That's where the Rwanda policy came in. No, the way forward is to have a group thinking, a global thinking. The UNCHR needs to be involved. And the problem is, and you won't like this, if we have such a thinking, we're going to take double the number of asylum seekers than we are now.
But Ivan,
let me finish. We are 17th on the list on the EU countries on the number of people we take.
And at the end of the day,
compared to landmass. Compared to landmass.
At the end of the day, at the end of the day, even if you stopped all the boats coming across the English Channel, they would find some other way of getting in.
Of course they would.
Remember,
used to come in lorries.
They came in lorries, and that was stopped. Unless you're going to have machine gun points at every 10 yards along the English Channel, which I'm not even sure that you would believe in, that you're not and shoot everybody, you're not going to be able to stop it. This is going to be a growing feature of this century, and there are going to be numbers coming here.
We're out of time on this. We're out of time on this. All of you, thank you very, very much. That was Specialist Immigration Lawyer Ivan Sampson and my panel. We'll be seeing the panel again shortly, and no doubt Ivan will be popping back up on your screens in the coming days or so as we continue to digest this latest round of figures. mailmog@gbnews.com is that email address. Coming up, do you think we should pay out for the actions of our ancestors? Yes, it's reparation time, people.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I am still not Jacob Rees-Mogg, but this is still State of the Nation. You've been getting in touch in your droves with your mail Mogg. So this is on asylum and immigration. We were talking about that earlier on. My fear is that we're going to end up with some kind of total amnesty because we just crumble under the weight of it all. Graham says, surely it is not beyond the wit of man to produce some AI software to process asylum seekers at a rate much quicker than any humans 24/7. I mean, AI can do everything, yeah, fine, but would that not face legal challenges at some point because of the technology? I get you. Martin says, we've had amnesties before, they do not work. For God's sake and the sakes of our nations and their peoples and their children, make it stop. And he's put quite a bit of that in capital letters. So Martin really means it. Martin, it's the way that you feel there, I think, is the way that, frankly, most people feel, don't they? They just want something done about it. You look at the cost, you look at the numbers, it's getting excessive. What that solution is, though, I fear is going to end up potentially being some kind of amnesty. But moving on now. Get this. A report co-authored by a UN judge says that the UK should pay up to £18.8 trillion in reparations for its involvement in slavery. Patrick Robinson has said that we need to cough up the cash to 14 different countries for our role in transatlantic slavery. Judge Robinson said that the estimated bill could indeed be an underestimation. I mean, it doesn't sound like it, does it? But apparently so. The Brattle Group report on reparations for transatlantic chattel slavery calculated £87.1 trillion should be paid from slaveholding states in total. The report comes as the family of former Prime Minister William Gladstone have this week apologised for his role in the slave trade. So, do you think we should pay up for something that happened in our history, or should we just leave the past in, well, the past? I am joined live here in the studio by human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell. Peter, thank you very, very much. Why should I have to pay for something that happened before I was born, that I have had nothing to do with, and in fact my ancestors actually had nothing to do with?
Well, the starting point is that the transatlantic slave trade was probably the most brutal, prolonged and cruel event in human history. 12.5 million people were taken out of West Africa to the Caribbean and North America. 12.5 million. Can you imagine how this country would feel?
Who initially enslaved those people?
Well, there were lots of different people, but it's true that some of the African rulers were complicit in the slave trade, as were some Arab slavers, but the primary role was in imperial countries like Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, and the United States,
So if someone buys a wrap of cocaine, should we clobber them massively, or should we go after the cocaine manufacturers? Because I would argue that we wouldn't have had a transatlantic slave trade if people in Africa and some Arab states as well hadn't done the initial enslaving.
Well, the initial enslaving was primarily by the colonisers, but as I said, with some degree of collusion by local chiefs and leaders. But, you know, we did this, and I asked people to think, how would we feel if a foreign country came to Britain and took out 12.5 million young, fit men?
We'd be very aggrieved, wouldn't we?
But not only would it tear families apart, it would destroy our economy. And that's exactly what happened in West Africa. The economies were destroyed, families were torn apart. When they went to the New World, they were forced to work without pay and under very brutal, cruel conditions. People were executed on the spot for the most petty infractions of the rules.
Do you honestly yourself personally feel a burden of responsibility for that?
I don't feel it myself, but I do think we collectively as a nation, we benefited from slavery. You know, many of our great cities were built from the wealth of slavery. The Industrial Revolution was in part funded by slavery. So, of course, our country as a whole has benefited. Now, when it comes to reparations, I think the first thing that has to happen is for the Prime Minister to say sorry.
So, hang on.
That would be the decent thing.
A Prime Minister of Indian heritage, you think, should be the Prime Minister to say sorry for our role in the slave trade?
Well, he is the Prime Minister of Britain. He represents the British people and the British state. And the British state was part of the slave trade, and so for the matter was the royal family.
But it's quite a good example, though, because at the moment in Britain we have millions of people who are who weren't born in Britain or who came from ancestors who weren't born in Britain, quite a lot from nations where the slave trade would have been prominent. So if we as a country are paying £18.8 trillion, they would also have to pay, wouldn't they?
Well, absolutely. You know, we as a collective, as a country, but I'll tell you how to pay it. The 250 richest people in Britain have a combined personal wealth of £700 billion. Right. If they paid an annual tax of just 1%, that would raise £7 billion a year towards paying off this reparation. Now, they wouldn't actually lose out because their wealth is increasing at the rate of 8 to 10% every year. So they just get 7% or 9% increase in wealth instead of 8 or 10%. So there's one way we could pay for it without ordinary people having to cough up out of their pockets.
Why do you think...
I don't think poor Britons should be the ones who pay for it.
Well, at least you've got a solution. I mean, I know a lot of people might disagree with it, but at least you've actually decided that not everybody would have to pay it. When's it the Irish people's turn?
Well, you know, I think it is morally right that we as a country should say sorry for bad things that were done in our name in the past. And likewise, other people should say sorry for the bad things they did to us. So the Germans should apologise for the destruction during World War II.
Do we genuinely, Peter, do we decide to have one day in the world where everyone just says sorry to each other?
Well, I think it has to be said with conviction. It doesn't have to be one day. It has to be done sincerely, and I don't think it has to be one day, but I just think that morally and ethically it's the right thing to acknowledge that bad things were done and to say sorry. Okay, fine. Saying sorry doesn't cost a penny.
And when do we get our money from the Vikings?
Well, that's a very good point. The Danes and the Swedes and on.
This is the reason why it gets a bit ridiculous, doesn't it? Because how far back do we go?
Well, you know, I think we need to acknowledge that all throughout history, bad things have been done by us and to us. Right. And the people who've done those bad things, I think, should say sorry. Saying sorry doesn't cost a penny. It's just common human decency.
I mean,
I would help draw a line under this past. Well, and I'm really distressed that Rishi Sunak has refused to say sorry. Sorry is so easy.
It's not his fault.
But he represents the state that did these things. Wow. You know, think of the suffering. I mean,
We are not responsible, for example, just very quickly, because I'm getting shouted at here, but we are not responsible, for example, for like the kind of quite brutal caste system that India has in place right now. So, you know, why would we end up paying reparations to countries like India, for example? I mean, it's not everything is not our fault. You know?
Well, of course, not everything is our fault. And, of course, there are lots of bad things happening in India right now that are nothing to do with Britain, and we have no obligation to say sorry. Right. But where we have identified errors and bad things, I think we should do the decent thing.
We haven't even had time to get onto the fact that we also, there's no doubt, loads of people are shouting at their TV screens now that we helped to end the slave trade, but we're going to have to draw a line under it. Peter, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed that, Peter Tatchell. Right, coming up, if I've still got time for it, what are the BBC so scared of? Plus, MPs have racked up almost 200 grand's worth of freebies. Now, if you were present during Keir Starmer's dad dancing at Coldplay, well, I'm sincerely sorry, and maybe that's some reparations that you can come after.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A mixture of sunshine and showers to come on Friday, and a cooler feel for many, particularly across East Anglia and the southeast, where it's been quite warm and humid today, and we've seen a few thunderstorms as a result. This low pressure sitting across northern Scotland is still providing some heavy showers here, and they'll keep going through the night. Any of those showers still left across the southeast are fading away now, so much of England and Wales will become dry overnight, and it will be a cooler night, certainly than the past couple of nights for many. Temperatures well down into single figures in some rural locations, most towns and cities about 10 or 11 to start Friday. Now, we will start off with a fair bit of sunshine, certainly over the Midlands, South Wales, much of northeast England too. Elsewhere, there'll be more of a mixture of sunshine and showers, and through the day, showers will develop more widely, but I still suspect a good chunk of the day will be dry, particularly for East Anglia and the southeast. The showers fairly well scattered, not particularly heavy, but it will be a fairly wet and increasingly windy day across the far north of Scotland, and everywhere fairly cool for the end of August, high teens for most at best. Saturday is a similar story. Again, yes, some sunshine, but plenty of showers. Showers on Saturday could be fairly heavy, quite slow moving in places, where the risk of thunder as well. Quite blustery across parts of Wales and southwest England. Another cool feeling day. Staying cool all weekend, but after some heavy showers on Saturday, should turn a bit drier for most of us.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's here on State of the Nation. You've been getting in touch with your thoughts on the slavery reparations. Steve says, no way should we be responsible for the actions of our ancestors. It seems that certain activists have thought, hang on a minute, if we push this, we can make a few bob. Steve, I think you're right. It's one of the problems that I have with acknowledging a lot of our previous wrongs, by the way, which is that I think once you do that, then you continue to open the doors for more. On Asylum, Stephen says, please can this government open their eyes and put 2 Royal Navy ships on patrol in the Channel and turn them back around to where they've come from? Yeah, look, I mean, again, it's a popular view. The problem is where they've come from is France, and the French might say a thing or two about that. But we move on. The Beeb has been accused by one of their own of laying low on the broadcasting of difficult subjects. One of the BBC's biggest stars, documentary maker Louis Theroux, has spoken out about how it's now harder to get programmes commissioned about risky subjects because the broadcaster is playing it safe. Known for his series about the more controversial topics such as the porn industry, modern-day Nazis, gangs, sexual predators, Louis Theroux himself has said that they make him nervous. But isn't that what good journalism and good telly is? Not that I would know, of course. We want to be sat on the edge of our seats, don't we? So why are the BBC cowering away? Why are they so scared of offending people? I offended an entire country in the space of 4 hours of broadcasting. That country being India, and that, by the way, is still going on. I'm still on TV, though, for now. Joining me is my panel, former BBC Newsnight political editor Michael Crick and tabloid journalist and broadcaster Mike Parry. Michael Crick, it seems only fitting I start with you on this. When I look at the BBC, I see 2 different elements to it. Very happy to do a lot of box-ticking exercises, documentaries about, I think, niche aspects where people do tick a lot of the boxes for whatever demographic they come from. I then also see them cowering away from other topics, like, for example, the grooming gangs investigations, etc. Is the BBC too afraid of certain things?
The natural attitude of the BBC is caution, safety, and I think it's particularly true these days when it is under fire from the politicians, the government, all questions about whether the licence fee will continue, the next charter, all of those issues. So, yes, and the BBC, for years and years and years, barely touched the issue of immigration, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
And in a way, that makes the problem worse because you're making the BBC look like the establishment, you're making people feel the establishment's not interested in and all of those causes. And I think, in a way, that contributed towards Brexit. The grooming gangs and their links and the way in which politicians in certain parts of the country, predominantly Labour politicians, it should be said.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen... I mean, one of your colleagues here made what I thought was a rather good documentary a few months ago about Charlie Peters.
Charlie Peters, yeah.
I don't think you'd ever see the BBC make that kind of programme. Having said that, there are also... I mean, the best investigative journalism these days is on the BBC, often to do with social issues and terrible things going on in our inner cities. But I do think the BBC does steer away from certain subjects. I also think that much of the 10 o'clock news is pedestrian and could have been written at 9 o'clock that morning.
Parry?
Well, the BBC is inherently left-wing. I don't think it's anything to do with their social views and all that. They are inherently left-wing politically. And I'm not just saying that as, stabbing the BBC. Some of their senior executives over the years have admitted a mea culpa. They have. They've said, do you know what, there is definitely a left-wing bias inside the BBC. So what I'm saying is, Michael, that if they are inherently a left-wing biased organisation, they are going to be attached to by all these organisations you're talking about.
Yeah, but for a start, Mark Thompson did admit that the BBC did not treat the whole issue of Brexit and immigration as seriously as it should have done.
Absolutely.
But the BBC is nothing like as left-wing as this channel is right-wing. And frankly, this channel ought to be closed down by Ofcom, and I've said that several times before.
Excuse me, we'll be having your salary for the evening back, I think, Michael Crick, actually. No, let me just one second, not on that. No, I just want to...
properly governed by Ofcom in a way that you are.
OK, fine. I just want to... I want to massively refute that, of course, but also, on top of that, I want to say there's a difference, isn't there, I think, between having a left-wing bias and being afraid of causing offence. But I would argue that they don't mind offending maybe certain people like us. You know, broadly speaking, white men, you know, and I would nearly say... old white men. I wouldn't want to offend Michael.
I did actually give a lecture about this about a couple of years ago in Oxford, talking about the liberal bias that was inherent within the BBC and Channel 4 in particular, and Sky and ITV at times as well. But I think it's complicated. Because there's all sorts of journalism that is very, very bold and is far better than you would ever get on this channel or on ITV or Sky.
Do you think the people that they don't mind offending, Mike, are people like you?
What I think is that they're very happy to use phrases like right-wing activist, right-wing extremist, when it's usually an issue which is not inherently liberal or centre-left. Let's take... They don't pick up on stories like a normal independent news body should. Let's take, for instance, Nigel Farage. It was 3 days before they even picked up on the Farage story.
They had a bit of bad journalism. They're slow to pick up on stories.
But you're right, they didn't pick up...
It's like an oil tank at the BBC. It takes a long time to turn things around.
It was a massive...
I'm agreeing with you, so don't keep...
Thank you. But what I'm saying is a massive story in which Nigel Farage had been debanked. It took them 3 days because they don't like Nigel Farage.
Right, pause, both of you. We're drawing a line under that particular topic. This summer, more than 100 MPs have received free hospitality in concerts and sporting events, amounting to more than £180,000. Keir Starmer attended a Coldplay concert, of course he did, with his gifted ticket valued at £698. Andrew Griffith, a Treasury Minister, accepted hospitality worth £2,000 at Silverstone from his former employer Sky. Critics say that free tickets could leave MPs open to influence, and it begs the question as to whether or not it's appropriate to receive gifts in the middle of a cost-of-living crisis. But meanwhile, of course, as well, on top of that, bit of a juxtaposition here, it's been reported that a council car park in Great Yarmouth is charging just under £30 for 8 hours. By the way, they want to come and try and park in central London. But anyway, whilst nationwide parking spots are now costing 3 times the amount compared to the previous year. Basically, the point here is ordinary Brits trying to drive around, park the cars, getting ripped off left, right and centre. If you're a politician, can you go and watch Coldplay on the take? Mike Parry, do you think that our politicians should be banned from taking freebies?
Well, no, because they've got a unique position in British life. I think they have to get close to certain influential bodies and influential people. And, for instance... I think it's a very good idea if a Cabinet Minister goes to Wimbledon and watches the men's final from the Royal Box. It's soft power. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You're getting very close to those people who run one of the most successful industries in this country, which is our sports industry. Take football, take cricket, take tennis, and they should be at the heart of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You couldn't possibly expect the Minister for Sport or even the Home Secretary to be asked to pay for their ticket at Wimbledon.
Yeah, the trouble is, though, that when they go and take these freebies, they're going to see the establishment in these sports. They're going to see the directors of the football club, the bigwigs that run tennis and motor racing.
What do you expect them to do? Go and see the fans?
Well, yes. In an ideal world, they should see the fans. And that's why governments and political parties in this country have been so slow to do things on behalf of the fans. And it's lovely going to the opera and going to Wembley and all of that. And John Burt, I remember when he was Director General of the BBC, he loved going to
good for it, wasn't it?
When he was running the BBC, he used to love, not that he was a politician, well, he is now, actually, he's in the Lords. But, sorry, I've gone off track. But what I think is that when you take these freebies, you've got to think, why are they entertaining me? And who are these people? How do I balance it? How do I actually get to speak to the workers?
Now, my slight counter to it, I can very much see both sides of this story, but my slight counter to it is that it's not actually that uncommon in any walk of life, any profession, to go on some kind of corporate day. Really, is it? So I suppose why politicians...
I mean...
You've had the odd freebie in your time.
I certainly have. I spent 25 years in Fleet Street, right? I would take a free holiday any time you got it. All I had to do in return was write a page in the travel section on Saturday saying, Necker Island, owned by Richard Branson. Oh, it's fantastic. Have you ever seen, by the way, a motoring report on a new car which said this car's useless? No, because you get the car for a week.
Quite exactly. That's why I was always... probably a bit more careful than you when I got these. Not always. I did take a few. I have taken a few. There are a lot fewer of them now.
What's the best freebie you've had?
Well, they're nothing but... I mean, I got taken to Wembley a few years ago, and actually they entertained us so much that I missed the first 5 minutes of the second half, much to my regret. But no, you've got to be careful. And, of course, the danger is if you dined and schmoozed by these people, you're then, as you've just described, you're reluctant to say anything horrible about them next time round. And that's what they're doing it for.
But I've got a great story about my best freebie. I get onto a British Airways plane in Los Angeles, and I've got a business class seat, and as I walk on, some chap says, you Mike Parry from TalkSport, the radio station? I said, yeah. He says, I'm the corporate director of communications. Oh, that's very good. He said, look, it's your lucky night. Joan Collins has just called off. She's not flying. Would you like her seat? It's 1A in first class.
Wow. Oh, well, there you go. That's all right. It's all right if you can take it, I suppose, isn't it? Do you think, Michael...
He might have preferred it if she was in 1B, wouldn't he? I don't know.
I think I probably would, yeah, absolutely.
Do you think it's impossible for a politician to take a freebie and then not give something in return, Michael?
No, I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's difficult. And, I mean, the trouble is, once you start banning these things, the more restrictions you place and somebody's got to police them and then, you get kerfuffles. I just think politicians have got to be very careful about the freebies they take. I think much more serious, actually, is when they take freebies abroad and they get foreign trips that are paid for or subsidised by foreign governments. And that you run into problems. On the other hand, it's very useful that our politicians should go to foreign countries just to see whether they do things better than we do.
Yeah, but it's very useful. Our politicians should go to the FA Cup final because it brings them closer to the people. I know you say, oh, they're in the
not really.
box.
They're not meeting the real people, are they? They're meeting a whole load of people there.
And I would argue, no, that is one thing I would argue that a politician could afford to pay for themselves.
No, don't agree, because there aren't real people at football matches anymore. The cheapest seat you can get in a decent seat's about 300 quid. So there aren't. The working class man has been forced out of football, in my view.
My ticket at Old Trafford is about, what is it? Well, I get a discount now. I'm 65. 520 for a whole season.
Have you got any tickets going? Anyway, right, OK, I'd like a freebie. Right, enough.
No,
OK.
Seat in the house.
Enough. Now, thank you very much to my panel for that. Coming up, is Prince Harry's family avoiding him? And why isn't Meghan wearing her engagement ring?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Welcome back. Now, reports say that Prince Harry will return to the UK on September the 7th, the eve of the first anniversary of the Queen's death. I don't know about you, but it does not feel like a year ago to me, that. But anyway, he's going to be at a charity awards. The Duke of Sussex is scheduled to pay a flying visit from California to London, and he's going to attend the Well Child event, which is a charity focusing on aiding children who are seriously ill. So, very worthy cause. Now, Harry will be making his trip solo, with Meghan Markle not in tow, and insiders have said that he has no intention to see the King or Prince William during his short stay. Or is it that they have no intention of seeing him? Because reports say they'll be dotted around the country. I believe Charles will be in Scotland. I think William's going to be in Wales. So what does all of this mean for the royal family, or what's left of it? Is Prince Harry a man of business, or is this another part of the big royal rumble? Joining me in the studio is royal commentator Judita De Silva. Judita, thank you very much. It's great to have you in the studio. So is this Harry snubbing the family? Are they avoiding him? What's going on?
I think it's pretty much neither party wants to be seen to be the one capitulating. And so everyone's kind of holding the position that they have other affairs to get to. But I definitely do feel that on the side of the royal family, with the firm in operation mode, it's keep us far away from this, because you don't want to be seen to be in any more contention with Camp Harry or any more conflict. There are other things to focus on. And as far as Harry is concerned, he's got the Invictus Games to focus on. It's possibly the most pure and untainted entity from the Harry and Meghan camp. Yeah. And he wants to dilute the impression of that. We know he's got the Netflix documentary, The Heart of Invictus, coming out. Everyone wants to kind of keep the peace to preserve their brands. But underneath it all, there will also be the awareness that in utopia, this would be an ideal time to come to the table and just talk as family and say, a year after the glue that held us together is gone, can we find healing? But just there's too much raw feeling and too much unresolved hurt for that to happen now.
Yeah, and probably quite a lot of regret on all sides, I would imagine. I think possibly, if he's capable of it, then Harry more so, given that we've had a lot of different outpourings and a lot of mudslinging. And I think possibly the bit for William that I think is deeply unforgivable, apart from him, Harry, going after his wife a bit, is that he knows that William can't react. And so he's trapped his brother, hasn't he? There?
Yeah, that is probably the hardest thing, because elementally, when just understanding the way men operate, when you attack my integrity as a man, either you fight physically or you have to go for a head-to-head. Yeah. He has no avenue to do that. So you've kind of pigeonholed him where you're fighting someone who cannot fight back. So there's a lot of anger there. But I think it's a question of, now that you've had a chance, Harry has had a chance to vent, there's nothing left in the tank. And even on the American side, when I speak to colleagues, when I'm out there working, even the Americans who are pro-Harry and Meghan say, I just want him to stop talking, please stop talking. When the tide turns in America, it's very dicey because you're in entertainment. And if you lose them, it gets negative very quickly.
On the American side of things, now Meghan Markle, pictured, it would seem, without an engagement ring, read into that what you will, wasn't really necessarily there for him when the chips were down, you know, wasn't there when the court case was taking place, was very quiet after the book and the backlash of the book. I believe that she might now be going to the Invictus Games.
Yes, she's going straight from California to the Invictus Games, yeah.
What do you make of what's going on there? Do you think there's trouble in paradise?
I don't think there's any trouble in paradise, but I think there's an understanding that with their advice coming from WMEU, that's the agency, they're telling them that they probably would have told them, Meghan, you haven't got a hope in hell right now in the UK. Stay away from it because anything that comes out of there is negative. For you to have a chance to build a brand that you sustain on your own, you've got to build it in America. Harry does have a window of opportunity to heal because this is home. And as angry as the people of Britain are with him, there is a window that should he make the right steps, he can change it.
That because, and this is quite a bleak thing to say, but is that window of opportunity divorce and apology?
I don't think it's divorce. What I think it is, like we've discussed before, the Camilla formula. That's what I call it. With Camilla at a point in time was the most hated woman, arguably, in the world. But all it was, stay the course, be true. And now people, when they talk about her, they kind of understand it that you've been really solid for Charles. You've been there. You've been consistent. We kind of understand why he chose you. You're the one for him. And there's a respect that comes with that. She doesn't talk too much. She doesn't engage too much. She stays in the background. So it seems like she knows her place. Meghan has to kind of take herself down a notch and play the role of being in the background. And in time, people might come to tolerate or accept her.
Well, we've not got too long left, but I think one of the keys in this could actually be if, and I don't think it's going to happen, by the way, but if Kate and Meghan started getting on.
Yeah. I think that's the key because, like I've said before, there is a way you can communicate with men from a female perspective that brings a sensitivity they don't have organically. If they can heal the rift, I believe Harry and William can come to the table and find healing. But the truth is, it'll never be the same relationship again.
No, I mean, it would be... No, of course not. Whatever kind of relationship it might have been to begin with, they have had very unique lives, not all of it great. Of course, look, Judita, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to have you in the studio. Royal commentator Judita De Silva there. No doubt a lot of you will be emailing in and getting in touch with your mail mogs, and some of those might be handed over to Professor Daniel Wotton, who is just on the other side of the studio right now. We've got a bit of time. Dan, what's coming up on your show?
Well, that was a fascinating discussion, actually. So we're going to be continuing the royal talk with Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier in the house. Plus, have you heard about this fascinating row that has broken out in Montecito about whether there should be a tour run by a former friend of Thomas Markle around the area where Harry and Meghan live? So the Sussex squad are saying absolutely not. This is an invasion of human rights. Meghan's family, who usually are at odds with her, have come out and said that they disagree with this and don't want the Markle name used. So tonight, we've got the man running the tour, Carl Larson, going head-to-head with Samantha Markle. I think there's going to be fireworks, Patrick.
No, you've not.
Yeah.
Say that again, one more time. Who have you got?
So we've got Samantha Markle, Meghan's estranged sister, head-to-head with the man who is running this tour around Montecito. So I think it's all going to kick off tonight.
That is absolutely box office. Well, I'm going to stick around right there, watch it, a live view from out there. Dan Watson is coming your way very, very shortly. I would like to say thank you to everybody who's been emailing in, who's been getting in touch, who's been tweeting, who's been getting in touch in all different forms. I will, of course, be back again tomorrow for my usual show, 3 till 6 p.m. So make sure that you keep your eyes and ears peeled for all of that. Have a fabulous evening. But, of course, there's no need to go anywhere. In fact, in just the next window, why don't you just go and grab yourself a couple of tea and wait for Dan Watson.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A mixture of sunshine and showers to come on Friday, and a cooler feel for many, particularly across East Anglia and the southeast, where it's been quite warm and humid today, and we've seen a few thunderstorms as a result. This low pressure sitting across northern Scotland is still providing some heavy showers here, and they'll keep going through the night. Any of those showers still left across the southeast are fading away now, so much of England and Wales will become dry overnight, and it will be a cooler night. So certainly than the past couple of nights for many. Temperatures well down into single figures in some rural locations. Most towns and cities about 10 or 11 to start Friday. Now, we will start off with a fair bit of sunshine, certainly over the Midlands, South Wales, much of northeast England too. Elsewhere, there'll be more of a mixture of sunshine and showers, and through the day, showers will develop more widely, but I still suspect a good chunk of the day will be dry, particularly for East Anglia and the southeast. The showers fairly well scattered, not particularly heavy, but it will be fairly wet and increasingly